Please give Liana a warm welcome.
Hey, everybody. This is a different experience for me. Normally when I'm here, it's the cheesing Christmas party, and I'm just trying to get people really drunk. Anyway, there's my disclaimer, or encouragement, I'm not sure which. And we're going to jump right to digital romance, speculative history, and modern social commentary. It's named after the Romantic period. The philosophy that accompanied it revalidated emotional experiences as relevant ones. It stepped away from absolutism. It embraced the exotic, unfamiliar, and distant. That includes folk art, medievalism, ancient cultures. I know it's weird that there was a time that that wasn't elevated, but it believed in speculation. That's why we're here. Escapism and pursuit of inner goals in a period of increasing industrialization and urban sprawl. And it was a backlash against rationalism, which is sort of the counter and pre-existing philosophy, so it rejected rules. It celebrated the sublime, raised up the individual, and embraced liberalism in the spirit of liberty and equality. So yes, in the first half of the 19th century, there was a liberal bias in the media. You can see Lord Byron and Beethoven up the top. It's funny that Madeline mentioned that campfire thing, because we've sort of hit that point in gaming right now, that we're sort of yelling at each other and throwing Molotov cocktails across that campfire, but we are sort of getting in and getting tribal and being collective at the same time. And that really, really applies to our debating our collective issues in interactive entertainment with white male privilege. And I want to add white male cisgendered privilege. That is embodied by the bald space marine phenomenon. Main playable characters in video games have an overwhelming chance of being white, bald, and armored. I think partially because hair takes up a lot of system resources. That's my theory about the whole thing. And they actually make an important mistake here. They list Assassin's Creed. And the protagonist for the first 3 Assassin's Creed games that's pictured there is actually mixed race and not bald. But we have such a pollution in our understanding of what certain races look like in the media that people thought he was white, and we'll get to that a bit more. Assassin's Creed is actually a game series that subtly challenges our current preconceptions and misconceptions involving race, gender, sexuality, and a host of other issues. But it does this in romantic tradition from big emotional experience, empathy, sensory awe, the sublime. We talked about the sublime a bit with Lovecraft and V.C. Andrews, and I'm like, oh, cool. I have termed this whole sort of phenomenon digital romanticism, because it shares both social conditions and techniques refined by the original romantic artists. Digital romanticism is tied to this growing culture war where hardcore gamers need to make room for new players from other spheres so the market can continue to grow. We're reaching a saturation in our existing user base, and not everybody is adapting, shall we say, maturely. But we're also in a period of rapid technological growth, and the impact is comparable to the industrialization of the Romantic period. So what happens is we need breaks from our modern existence because we've got this, I call it, condo and cubicle culture. We live in these boxes the way, you know, we had the row houses, the Dickensian thing, where everybody's suddenly squashed together. And it can make us feel small in a bad way as opposed to the good way that Romanticism encourages. So we're being affirmed by being allowed to be small, but in this very sublime way, instead of as a cog in a machine. So digital romantic properties relay theme and meaning through powerful, interactive, emotional experiences, but, and this is critical, they don't seek to be the final word on what those experiences end up being, because the act of playing informs the narrative. They draw from periods of history we believe were nobler than our present. And Chris and Mark talked about this earlier, about the fact that most of our history is actually myth, like myth by consensus. And what digital romance does is shows that these time periods had their own problems. And that allows us to address things in our present day through feelings. The Romantic era also defined certain types of characters that are huge in video games. The Romantic Hero, which we all sort of know, that's Edward Kenway from Assassin's Creed Black Flag. These are so known in our culture now. We kind of take them for granted until we start applying them to females. And one of the few, sisters to the Romantic Hero is the Byronic Hero. And video games contain one of the few female Byronic heroes, Lara Croft. And normally when female characters with these characteristics appear in fiction, they end up as the seductress, not as the main character. I mean, we're used to, Byronic comes from Lord Byron, right? And so it's immediately traditionally male. Lara blows this out of the water. And most people, when you say Lara Croft and blow, they think it's a Google search. But I digress. One of the big things about Romanticism and digital Romanticism, these aren't period paintings. These are actually, in-game footage. But these in-game pieces could be ripped right out of the art of Romantic periods. Okay, maybe not the Cyclops in the top corner, but, I can dream. The themes of individuality and liberty come through in the interactive quality of games. The feeling of player freedom is this big thing that people try to invoke, and that comes through various types of choice. Some games allow you to customize the appearance of your character. Others allow multiple endings, but players also get to create their own action movies by the way they move their characters through the world. Now, all these variables create high risk for what Mark Asquith was talking about earlier, dissonance. This concept of dissonance, that things don't quite, they're rubbing up against each other like sandpaper instead of flowing together like, pick your own dirty metaphor. And in gaming, we have a unique form of dissonance. It's called ludonarrative dissonance. And this is a tricky term because it's not quite defined. It's a very personal experience. But in the simplest terms, it's a game telling you you can push the red button, but you can't, like poor Stimpy behind me. And this means that it's impossible to enjoy a story when you get this phenomenon as both a game and a story. You have to balance out one or the other. The term was coined by a developer called Clint Hawking in response to the game BioShock. And the problem with BioShock in his criticism, which is different from his emotional response to the game, was that the gameplay said, just kill everything that looks at you funny, seek power, and you will progress. Well, the game was periodically attempting to force you into a narrative of altruism and helpfulness. And what Hawking wanted was a prototypical romantic experience. He wanted to be taken to a place where there was justification for the foreign social norms the game forced him to engage in. And the lack of resonance between what the game as a game was doing and what the game as a story was doing prevented him from having that, which resulted in real frustration, even though he acknowledged that the story the game told was actually good. Now, the tricky thing about this is players don't give a damn about this phenomenon, but it matters on the design side, because any kind of dissonance when you're designing a game means that your intended message and what you actually end up communicating aren't the same. And that's what we're going to explore through example for the rest of this talk. And I want to make it clear that this doesn't mean that what you're about to see are in any way bad games. It means they have a design flaw from a philosophical perspective that creates some unintended messages or some intended ones in the way that it works. And the first one I want to focus on is the third BioShock game, BioShock Infinite.